Hi, and welcome to Drafting Compliance. I'm Kayne, he's Tom, and we talked about planning last time. Today, we're talking about the status of our own FedRAMP journey. But before we get to that, we have some beers. What are we drinking today, Tom?
Well, this is certainly a departure from what we normally drink, but I think that's a good thing. It's
I
it's,
hope
it's
so.
always an opportunity to give you something new to taste. So this is a Pilsner. This is
Okay.
Firestone Walker Brewery's Pivo Pils. So let's show the can. It's a very cool can, especially if you like coat of arms.
Yeah,
So
I
if you
mean,
like,
I like that it's got a bear and a lion doing fisticuffs in front of what I'm guessing is a coat of arms. It's pretty exciting.
yeah, who would
But
win
you also
that?
say
I'm
it's
not sure.
I think it's the bear 100% of the time. Just it's
Okay,
got the body mass.
yeah, for sure.
Um, Plus, it's a male lion, and what do? They lay around and wait for food to be brought to them.
Yeah,
I
it's
want
life.
to ask though. This is a pilsner, so that's like Ronier, right? Up in the Pacific Northwest, we have vitamin R.
I'm not sure. I've never had that.
Okay, so sorry, that's a Washington
Ronier. Oh, is
State
that
thing.
Rainier? Is that Rainier?
Yes, yes, that's
Okay.
the
All right.
posh version of it that you get at
Yeah.
Target, right?
Got you.
Yeah, I only mentioned that because I was on a
You,
ski lift the other day with somebody who had a six-pack of vitamin R, and there were four of us on the lift, and they were surprised that I did not want one, but then they were great because it means two beers each for them on a 10-minute chairlift.
how great is
So
that?
I'm guessing this must be a quick drinking. What do you call it? Sessionable, Tom? Is this a
So
sessionable
well,
beer?
let's just say this: Pilsners are a very approachable beer in general, but I will
Okay.
say, like an American lager, what most people drink in the United States, the Bud Lights and Budweisers and Millers and all of those approach a Pilsner, but it's very Americanized.
Hmm.
And so it's generally considered an American lager, not a Pilsner. Pilsner originally it has a lot more flavor and character than what we drink here as domestics. And the original Pilsner comes from, um, uh, I think it's Pilsner Quell, comes from Czechoslovakia. So,
Wow.
this will be interesting. I've had a lot of that beer, as will our one of our HR gals. She's very familiar with it, Helena. She's from the Czech Republic, so she
Cool. Well,
knows.
we'll also wait and see if anybody fact checks you in the comments below.
Yeah, we will. This is a 5.3%. So this isn't too bad. Certainly tame by what we have been drinking on this show. So I say we crack it and
I think we're gonna have a go at
give it a
this.
pour.
Okay.
You'll notice right away there's not a lot of color to this guy.
Oh, actually, that's yeah. It's very faint yellow.
Yeah, it gets darker with the pour, but it comes out very very thin looking. It's very bubbly. So
You
there's
know,
some
I've
effervescence to
had
it.
prosecco in this shade.
Mm,
Oh, that smells like beer.
yeah, that's got that.
Oh, that smells like my misspent teenage years. My goodness,
Yeah,
that's a trip
this
down
should
amnesia lane right there.
this should definitely have some bring back some memories. This has that
Yeah,
that I would call it grainy, very grainy smell. Also a little bit of banana in there.
yeah, yeah.
It
I'm
ports a
just
pretty nice head, but the head's dissipating pretty quickly.
Yes, it definitely
So I'm gonna
does.
I'm gonna top him off.
Not. Oh, you didn't fit yours. Oh, well, look at my
I
pro
like to I
skills.
like to
Ooh.
watch the pour happen and then refresh it. So
It also has
all right,
very small, very vertical bubbles, and not a lot of them. Interestingly enough,
well let's give it a taste.
and I can see through this damn thing. Like that's
Yeah,
a
it's
rare beer on this
there's
show, Tom. It's
absolutely no particulates in this beer.
yeah. All right. Well, let's have a go.
Yeah, this tastes like the beer of my youth for sure.
Yeah, this
Um,
tastes like 7-Eleven at 3 a.m. when I was 13.
yeah, yeah. This
Yeah.
is this is
Wait, am I supposed to
if
say that? Oh well, kids, don't be like me. There we
if
go.
you're
That's what I
looking
tell my kids
for
all the time.
if you're looking for character in a beer, I would not pick this one up. It's
This is
very
inoffensive. I will say that. I mean, other than what I
yeah.
just said, this is inoffensive tasting.
It just tastes like American beer to me. So
It doesn't taste like a lot. Thankfully, it does not have a lingering aftertaste,
yeah, it cleans
which is
up very
kind of
quick.
nice. Yeah. So far, this is kind of checking the box of wow, it's not offensive. I'm going to try another one. This is definitely not that cinnamon bun sticky ale, which I saw a can of that the other day. I was thinking of giving it to a friend, and then I decided, like, how much do I like him?
This
Do I want him to
that beer
hate
really
me?
stuck with you, Kane.
It was terrible. It was. I have nightmares.
I would agree
Yeah,
this is sessionable. I mean, you could
yeah. I could
probably,
see why on a chairlift you could just pound these.
yeah,
But also, please, if you're at a mountain resort and you're drinking, drink responsibly, and also clean up your empties because we don't want to hit them with our boards or our skis.
yeah.
Right? Be nice.
Two things I don't
With
do.
that, being nice, I
No,
challenge you on that one, Tom.
board
I think
or
you're.
ski.
Aha. Okay. Well, today we're not just talking about beer. We're talking about FedRAMP, and we're talking about Hyperproof's FedRAMP journey. And for those of you who haven't gone through our back catalog of the show, the reason we started doing this was to talk about Hyperproof's journey towards FedRAMP. And I think at the time we had it in our head that we were going to get it done in a year. We're on episode 30. We've already done 20. Well, we've already hit episode 24. I had to do math in my head there. So, Tom, how are we doing now on our roadmap towards FedRAMP? Moderate.
Yeah, I would say just like any other really large project, there are things that come up that surprise you. And certainly we've had our share of those in this project, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've had everything from vendors that have assured us they were FedRAMP moderate or would be before we were, kind of pull that Lucy football away from me as I went to kick. I think that was one of
Uh,
your.
yeah. Vendors that make ticketing systems, not to put too fine a point on it, but yeah, something like
Yep.
that. Yeah.
So we've had those things. We've had challenges from a product perspective that we didn't anticipate initially, that we've largely scoped and tackled, but those things take time. And
Mm-hmm.
then we've had what I would call competing priorities. We are a company that really focuses on customer ask and
Mm-hmm.
pleasing the customer. And so when something comes along that prioritizes that over the FedRAMP project, we certainly are going to please the customer first. Not that we aren't doing FedRAMP for customers as well. We are, but sometimes you just something screams a little bit louder. So we've had some of that have occurred on this project as well. So we are definitely behind where we thought we would be, but we are also trying to be very transparent about that. We're also trying to be very clear about what we think the new timelines are going to look like.
Is that why you picked this beer, Tom? Because this beer is very transparent. I mean, I'm thinking
Sorry,
the only thing you could have more transparent would be like a hard seltzer.
there's clarity to it.
Yes.
So we currently think we're probably more on a timeline that looks like the end of second quarter in 2024.
Thank you. I was going
The
to ask which year.
Yep, the environment is largely built,
Mm-hmm.
so folks can attach to it and start to see what looks like hyperproof there. A bunch of the product changes that we have requested be put in have been completed. There's still some that are in the works, but that's really good. So, what we have here is the culmination of a bunch of work starting to come to a fruition, and
Mm-hmm.
and and now we just need to drive it home. So, yeah. So, the TLDR is we're behind, but we are making significant progress, and we are trying to communicate that.
Okay. And I remember the last time I went back and I looked at the last time we did an update, and at the time we disclosed we'd had some supplier challenges for Hyperproof. So since the last time we talked, how have those challenges progressed?
Sure. Really, I would say there was two massive challenges. The first was um, Okta had bought Auth0
Mm-hmm.
and pulled away the effort to turn Auth0 into FedRAMP moderate. So we had to look for another option. Luckily, our partners at Okta had another option. So we have fully deployed that. So that's fully deployed. We have an authentication mechanism that's FedRAMP authorized. That's in play. It's already fully functional with our FedRAMP environment. So
Mm-hmm.
that's good. So that's case one. Case two was, we were heavy users of both Jira and Confluence. And, those who have those products in their environment going after FedRAMP will understand that there's been some pain around those. There's been some communicated dates that have been missed. Again, this is a very large undertaking, so I assume Atlassian is having some competing priorities as well. So we had to scramble. We took word that we took their word, excuse me, that they would beat us to the finish line, and then they pulled back from that and didn't communicate a new date. So we really had to find a different option. Luckily, we partnered with a company called Contigix. They have taken the data center versions of both Jira and Confluence, and they've deployed it, and they've got their FedRAMP ATO on top of it. So we are in the process of migrating. We're actually just about to start, probably tomorrow or Thursday. So
Hmm.
this is the week of 3/5 that we're recording this. We will start user acceptance testing on that environment. So it's getting very, very close. We suspect that we'll have final migration sometime early April, although we have to contend with some schedules to get that done. So
Right. But ultimately, that means that our developers and our other users who are using Jira and Confluence can continue using those as opposed to trying to rip and replace them, which I can't imagine that that's going to go very well for any company that's using Jira
well,
and
if you
Confluence as
if
part of their default workflows.
yeah, and if you think about how those products have positioned themselves, they've positioned themselves as to be an integration hub throughout your entire enterprise.
Hmm.
So any sort of rip and replace of that is very painful. You're talking about a bunch of disparate groups that are using these products for different use cases, all have built their own process and workflows around it. And suddenly
Hmm.
you would break all that along with integrations to things like potentially ServiceNow or I'm sorry, Salesforce or Slack or whatever else you have in your environment. That's very problematic. We did not want to have to go down that path. That's probably more like a year project for us if we would have done that. So
Yeah.
this is much more preferential to us. So the last challenge around vendors that I'll mention is our centralized logging system.
Hmm.
It was not FedRAMP authorized, although they had an option that was FedRAMP authorized. So what we did was we split our environments. So we're logging commercial to the commercial um, platform, and we're logging our FedRAMP environment to the FedRAMP environment for
Yeah, that makes
logging. So
sense. And that's as you'd expect. And also, FedRAMP is more prescriptive in terms of what you have to log,
yeah,
like are
you have to log
required to
a
log.
considerable amount more in terms of the data and the data types. So yeah, it creates some overhead, some cost, and so we're trying to do everything we can to keep that cost low because ultimately our customers will be paying some portion of that cost, right? So trying to be judicious.
And yeah,
But
absolutely. And if viewers are curious about the logging changes, we did an episode about that. I'm sure we'll get a link to that in the show notes about the specific things that FedRAMP would require you to log as opposed to normal commercial environment. So, Tom, I want to take the one other question though is like, so those are the challenges that we had last time. What new challenges have come up since that last time or since we planned the project?
yeah, certainly we've had some. I would say time management has been our biggest challenge. Um, you know, I could probably demand um, 40 developers at any given time, for the next 3 months. Reality is we can't do that. So,
Hmm.
we have significant challenge that we are meeting, by the way, but to continually look at our priorities and saying, are we working on the right thing at the right time? That's our first challenge. Um, we also have, I would say just operational challenges. Building out a comprehensive asset management platform.
Hmm.
We've done it now, but that was not a small lift. I think most people think of asset management as a spreadsheet. When you look at asset management underneath sort of the umbrella of FedRAMP, it's extremely comprehensive. So getting all of your assets out of whatever you have it in, whether it's a spreadsheet or some other platform, into a FedRAMP ATO platform, and getting all of the variables that you need built out around it. That's a challenge. So
Yeah,
we've
like I
completed that.
imagine you'd probably have to have like firmware in there too, right? Like not just that you have an
Firmware.
asset, but the firmware,
Yep,
the software stack, and everything documented
that's right.
to a very high degree of precision, which you probably wouldn't have in that legacy spreadsheet, right?
That's correct. And so we looked at products that would help us gather those pieces automatically, which was very
Hmm.
nice. So a lot of the bits and pieces of asset management we have gathered. We have a process that's automated that gathers those pieces. There's some we have to input, but for the most part, those are gathered automatically now.
Hmm. And it's a
Things like
FedRAMP compliant one too, right? It's because
that's right.
it's in the FedRAMP authorization boundary.
Yep. That's right.
If you're enjoying this conversation on YouTube, ring the bell to get notifications about my quest to find literally any beer that's drinkable. Although I'll say this it's pretty clear, um, almost drinkable. Or subscribe to this podcast in your app of choice to make this part of your routine. Now, Tom, you mentioned Stigs being a challenge as well off camera. In our configuration management episode, you also mentioned this. Can you talk us, maybe for our viewers who aren't familiar with Stigs, just to start off with that, about what they are, and then give us a little more insight about why they're a challenge?
Sure. So a STIG is a DoD standard for baseline configuration of an asset. So FedRAMP requires you have a secure baseline configuration. They prioritize um, what that baseline should look like, and they prioritize using a STIG first. And when a STIG is not available, you can use a CIS level 2 benchmark.
Hmm.
And then finally, if neither of those are available, you can build your own based upon a CIS level 2 benchmark. So, for instance, if you're using a variant of Linux that there is not a STIG or a level 2 CIS benchmark, use another Linux variant and use it to build your own CIS2 benchmark, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So here we are looking at STIGs. There's certainly a bunch of gaps in the STIG documentation. There's a bunch of pretty common software in the, what I would say in the SaaS world, that isn't available as a STIG. So you default to level 2. So that's a challenge. But how STIGs
Hmm.
are written, because it's a government documentation, it's not how you and I would think about writing a process or writing a baseline. There's not necessarily a checkbox approach to it. So
Hmm.
it creates, I would say, an implementation gap between the person who's trying to read through it and actually implement the change. So that's been a challenge, and quite frankly, our base OS is not available as a STIG or as a CIS, a level 2 benchmark. So we're right off the bat, we're building our own benchmark, which is just a challenge. Now the good news is we have begun building and successfully building everything but our Linux model for our user
Hmm.
laptops. So that part was easy, which is a big chunk of what we do. And then the final thing is when we build out a STIG in our operating environment, in our security boundary, we're really talking about changing a base image that gets deployed every time we spin up resources.
Hmm.
So we don't approach that lightly, because obviously those things are happening on a hour by hour basis as needed. So it creates a significant amount of workload to first understand the STIG, and second, when they're not available to deploy, build your own.
In retrospective, Tom, for companies that are considering getting a FedRAMP or making an attempt at doing FedRAMP, do you think that that's something they should look at, is the availability of STIGs for their platform, and make a decision like beyond just going to the FedRAMP marketplace and going, hey, are my vendors available? But also figuring out like how hard is this going to be when you're scoping out the level of effort?
Well, I think you want to go in with eyes wide open, right? So
Mhm.
anything you can do to gather more information ahead of time, and so you can scope the level of effort you're going to go through. Well,
Right.
I think that puts you in a better position. Certainly, it makes it less likely you have to go back to the funding well. Which anybody who does projects knows that's always painful.
Yes.
That being said, I think most people will kind of get the hang of this. It just becomes more work in general, and you should plan for that than you would first think.
Yeah, and it sounds like there's a lot of different engineering and development projects that are happening in a variety of different stages. Um, Anything you can share with our audience about how you're managing keeping all these plates spinning?
Yeah, well, I can tell you honestly, I wasn't doing a very good job of that. There is so many irons in the fire. I had to reach out for some help. So we have very capable people, both on the product development side and within the company and other areas that kind of stepped into the breach to help. So on the product development side, there's somebody now managing the entire sort of project scope that's going into the product, which is a lot of changes. That includes things like STIGs, and we're doing a VPAT, which is um, an accessibility exercise on our platform.
Hmm.
So for people who are familiar with that, we could maybe do a whole episode on that one. But all of these different project pieces that are in various states, but really span a very large group of people. Now there's now a project person coordinating all of that, which is very helpful to me. And then on my side of the world, where I have to culminate bits and pieces of documentation into full-fledged auditable documentation, I needed help gathering that, but I also needed help just writing herd on the folks that are building that documentation. It takes time. And so I had a very capable person step into that gap for me. So really, what I would say is you should take away from this isn't a solo project. You really need to bring in, if you're working every day with vendors and with strategy and with documentation, you don't necessarily have the time to also work on project management tasks that really keep things humming along smoothly. So go find
All
that
right.
person.
So, yeah, absolutely. So, again, thinking then of larger organizations, Tom, would you say there's a different strategy or alternate strategy for managing their journey to FedRAMP?
Yeah, I mean, I think the right approach is think about how you're going to align your resources up front. So especially if you've watched the episodes that we've put out there, Kayne, you would start to understand that there is a significant amount of work involved with FedRAMP moderate, and we're doing moderate. Candidly, there's already talks about what should we do to get to high eventually, but we're just doing moderate right now. And so because of that, you should really go in sort of fully focused on what you're asking your enterprise to do. In the larger companies, quite frankly, it's a much bigger lift than it is here at Hyperproof. So you're talking about crossing functional groups in a way that's very disruptive for probably at least a year. In big enterprises, I would say you're going to average more to like 2 to 3 years.
And we've heard those numbers thrown out by other guests we've had on the show, where it's a couple-year journey at a minimum.
Yep. So go in eyes wide open, align resources, and put project management resources on the project initially to help scope it, but certainly to help follow up on all the sort of independent items from different groups that are required.
Sounds like we also might change management also might be a benefit to have in there as well, right?
Always. Yep. Change management is an absolute requirement. So. Yep.
Cool. Well, I think we've covered everything so far in our journey to FedRAMP. The last thing we normally would cover on the show is about beer. And Tom, do you want to go first, or should I go first on this?
I'm happy to go first on this.
Okay, have a go.
So I almost feel bad about how I'm going to review this because Pils is one of my son's favorite varieties of beer. He loves this. I do not. I certainly can drink it. And it's sessionable. It's not offensive to me, but it just doesn't have any of the character that I love about craft beer in it. This is a lager, so you can expect it to not be too crafty, but it's just kind of bland to me, if I'm being honest. So I would never go and buy a Pils for just me to drink. But right now there's 2 different ones in my fridge because my son sometimes comes to have a drink. So. That being said, since I will never go buy it for myself or order it for myself, I'm going to give it a 4.
Wow. So, like Tom, I would never buy this for myself. I would never drink this by myself. I would never voluntarily drink this. Like Tom, I would say that this is inoffensive and lacks much or any of the character associated with craft beers, as you said. Unlike Tom, I'm going to. I was trying to think of this is a 4 or a 5 because it doesn't offend me. It doesn't make me want to brush my teeth or.
Well, wouldn't it be fun
if
you had a score higher than mine, Kayne?
Geez, I think it might happen. I think this is going to be because I gave something else a 4. I think this is a 5. Like this is probably the best thing I've had on the show.
Wow.
Admittedly, it's the worst thing you've had. No, wait, cinnamon bun ale. That will always have a point of infamy associated with it. But yeah, I think I'm going to go with a 5 on this one, Tom. This is my seal of approval. If you want something that is inoffensive and boring and you don't know anything about beer, you probably can't go wrong with this unless you're drinking with anybody who knows anything about beer. Your mileage may vary. This is not legal or investment advice. There we go. Well, that's all for today. So, Tom, thanks for being on. And if you think you'd know a beer I'd like, or if you have a FedRAMP question, drop it in the comments below. And remember to like our LinkedIn and YouTube pages to hear live interviews with information security professionals.